All right, I call to order the July 24th meeting of the Los Alamitos Planning Commission. Oh, roll call. Sorry. Got ahead of myself.
Chair Riley,
Here?
Vice Chair Sofocanic,
Here.
Commissioner Andrade, absent, Commissioner Quilty, absent, Commissioner DeBolt,
Here.
Commissioner Gross,
Here.
Commissioner Lowe.
Here.
All right, please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Presentations, I don't remember that section. That's always been on our agendas. Well, there's nothing there, so. That takes us to oral communications. Do I need to open the public hearing at all if no one's here? Yeah. Seeing no one present, we'll move on. Approval of minutes. We have a lot of minutes to approve. Can we do these as a batch, or do we have to do them one at a time? I think we can do them one at a time, right?
One at a
Because
time, because we got some,
Attendance and absences.
Yeah.
We have to make sure we have a quorum for each of them.
Okay, so at the top of my list here, or stack here is the special meeting on March 14th.
I move approval.
You can't, it's no, we don't have a quorum.
We don't?
No.
1, 2, 3, we do have a quorum.
We have, but that date doesn't.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Andrade's not here, Larry's not here, and we need him.
Correct.
We only have 3 of us that can vote on it.
Oh, really?
So let's,
Wasn't that a quorum
3
of
people.
the 4? Riley, Andre,
We
DeBolt,
need
Lowe.
a quorum of commissioners
That were
who
in
were at
attendance.
that meeting to vote on the approval of the minutes at tonight's meeting.
so we need all 4 of the people that were at that meeting to be there.
That's correct.
No, is it a quorum?
A quorum of that meeting, you said, right?
It's
There were
just-
4 at that meeting, so a quorum of that is 3.
It was 3.
But do we have 3 of the folks who
Yeah.
were
Yeah.
there?
Yeah, we're
We
here.
have that, we can?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll second it.
Okay, I have
Favor?
a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 And I
And Lowe.
abstain.
And say aye.
Okay, motion carried on that one. Next is April 24th.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second. Second it?
I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Oh, you, okay,
Lowe has.
sorry. I didn't hear you.
Sorry.
We don't have a quorum for the May
Now
22nd.
you don't have a quorum.
So, what about April 24th is the next one I see?
We just did April
Skip one
24th.
somewhere?
Yeah,
June 26th.
May 26th.
Same problem.
I have that, for some reason, that's at the very bottom of my pile. I don't know why. Do,
Which one?
Special meeting, May 22nd.
For May 22nd.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And we can't do June 26th either.
Right.
okay, so May 22nd gets pushed.
For next month.
May 22nd gets pushed.
Deal.
Is that it?
That's it. On the minute.
Is that everything that we can do? Okay.
Sure, we'll bring back the 22nd regular meeting minutes, special meeting minutes, and then the June 26th regular meeting minutes to your next meeting.
Hopefully we get-
Okay. Sorry. So consent calendar, none. Staff report, none. So item 9A, public hearing. consideration of zoning code amendment concerning small wireless cellular installations within the city of Los Alamitos. I have a staff report.
Chair Riley and members of the commission, this is zoning ordinance 1803, zoning ordinance amendment. And you have seen this many times, but not as an ordinance. We've discussed this in a few of the past meetings, but this is the first time it's here as an ordinance. This is after the stakeholder meeting that we had a while back where the cell providers talked to us. The things that we want to point out in this report are that why this new code section. There's an increased deployment of small wireless facilities for more wireless access that has happened since 2016, this new type of pole. Fills small to intermediate gaps in macro coverage. There's the large antennas that we already have. This fills in the little spaces in between. Significant increase in data consumption over networks and ensure balance between the visual and aesthetics standards. What changes here is that we add a chapter 1731, small wireless facilities, to the code. It amends chapter 1730, which is the wireless code that we have right now, in order to point toward chapter 1731, the new one. This is uniform and comprehensive regulations to deal with this in particular, separate from those larger wireless poles, antennas. And it has standards for permitting, development, siting, installation, design, operation, and maintenance of small wireless facilities that are in the right-of-way. This also allows the director to administratively approve small wireless installations too, rather than come to you with every light pole. I mean, eventually every light pole in town may have one of these, so rather than take every one of them to the planning commission, this would allow the director to administratively approve it. So those are the changes. We also received from one of the cell providers today an email that staff has responded to, and that's in front of you. I'm not sure whether we should go through it each question at a time or whether you want to go through it or not. But if you would like to discuss her thoughts on what could change, yeah. And back to you, Chair Riley.
Great, thank you. Questions for staff?
No questions, but I got some comments.
RT needs more
One,
time.
well, a question. On the staff report, well, it's in the ordinance. Does this apply to buildings as well as just poles? It says on required approvals on page 7 of 20 in the ordinance, very last. Small wireless facility permit required. And it talks about the facility permit shall be required to locate, modify any small wireless facility in the city, including without limitation within the public right-of-way. So does this then apply to the buildings as well, the ones we see on buildings, or?
If I could, there's a definition on page 6 of 20 for small wireless facility. And so it has to fit that criteria. There's 6 key points, and it has to fit that criteria in order to be considered a small wireless facility. If it doesn't fit that, then it would, as I understand it, it would fit into the other portion of our existing code and have to follow that procedure and that process. So if it, again, it has to fit all that criteria. If it does, it would be an administrative review. If it doesn't fit that criteria, it requires the standard process you're accustomed to. It would come before you and be a public hearing matter in front of the commission.
I guess, can they be located in residential neighborhoods?
Yes.
Top of my house, if I want to,
I suppose there is that possibility that it could be done that way. Again, it's a matter of meeting all of the criteria that's identified here.
I can speak to that a little bit if you don't mind.
Yeah, go ahead.
Part of the drafting of this ordinance, and aside from the need that Tom Oliver has laid out in terms of the need to do this to match evolving technology and the actual deployment of this new approach to providing cellular, part of the catalyst for this ordinance was revised FCC regulations and a general order in particular that's changed the timelines that the city has to respond to applications for these types of installations. It's also changed and limited the amount of discretion a city has when it considers these type of applications. And the intent of that general order is to really facilitate rapid deployment of this new technology and these new antenna structures. The FCC order itself is written in pretty general terms that includes language concerning the mounting of these antennas on structures. The thrust of it seems to be in existing poles, light standards, and so forth within the public right-of-way. But the language you're seeing in the ordinance reflects the approach taken by the FCC so that we're covered in addressing the same issues that that order addresses. I think in practical application and what we're hearing from the stakeholders themselves is that their intended deployment really looks at the right-of-way, and there's a number of reasons logistically why they prefer that rather than trying to approach someone as an individual homeowner and saying, hey, do you mind if I put this on your rooftop? So the language of the ordinance is written broad, which is consistent with FCC regulations, but I think the actual deployment that we'll see is going to be directed at installations in the right-of-way.
All right. My concern is that locating them in the residential areas, okay, under our old code or under the, for the larger facilities, if you're within so many feet of residential structures and stuff like that, they have to come in here for a full-on approval. You can't do them administratively, okay, within, so many feet of because of I think it's the concern for the, whatever it is that they emanate, the microwave or the electromagnetic fields, which may or may not contribute to anything. There's both sides of the deal. But I understand everything you just said, but does that mean we cannot put an exception for residential areas or within so many feet of schools and playgrounds? You go to a playground and you see the cell stuff right there on one of the light poles, and you got the kids and everybody out here playing ball, and I don't know. I have no problems with the right of way. My concern is do we need to consider prohibitions as to where, like in any of the residential areas or on any of the community facility. Where there's children present or whatever. I can just see a neighbor putting one on their house. You talk about creating a firestorm. You're going to have.
Yeah, I think.
Whether it's scientific or not, I don't know. I haven't done that, but.
Well, I can address the premise of the question itself, and I think there are express preemption issues with the FCC general order that limits not only our ability to restrict proximity to residential uses, but also prohibits the city from considering radio frequency emissions when making land use decisions for these installations.
Yeah.
So as long as the antennas themselves meet the emission standards set by the FCC, they have a right to erect the structures.
We can't get into.
That's unfortunately correct with respect to the general order.
Reconcile that with number 13 then. Because that's my next question.
13, I'm sorry, can I get a page
Page 9 and
reference?
20. We wanted to have a exposure compliance report, certified engineer. It's not an issue.
Yeah.
Why are we requiring?
Well, this perhaps is a segue into the materials that were left on the dais prior to the meeting in response to comments we received from Verizon Wireless. The materials that Tom distributed include staff's response to comments we've received from the stakeholders. There were a number of comments within this document. There's 4 areas, specific areas where staff is recommending revisions be made to the ordinance. We could go through those one by one and hopefully incorporate wherever you land on that into the commission's ultimate recommendation this evening. In defense of item 13, this is addressed in our comments, and we're actually recommending that we remove that provision from the ordinance based on the belief or willingness to understand that this could be a long-term administrative burden for the city staff to continuously request updated reports with the understanding that once these devices are in place, the emissions generated from them are not subject to escalation, that they will be what they are. And also an understanding that the FCC ultimately is the one who will monitor compliance with their emission standards. I think is within the city's rights to ask for those reports just as almost an informational data point. But again, following receipt of the comment, we've had a discussion with staff and they feel that perhaps it's unnecessary to do that and to allow FCC to monitor and to eliminate the need for staff to trace down those reports every 5 years.
And is that the fifth staff response on the second page of, is that what you're referring to?
It's
It's
on the third page.
that's correct. Third page,
Third page,
second from bottom.
Second up, right?
Yes.
Oh, wait.
It's a
Well, you got
1730.
another one up top,
1731-06.
31042 then.
yeah. This is pertains to 1731-060 sub 7.
I think, isn't what Art's pointing out, 17.31.04013?
Yeah.
Page,
Oh, so this is the 13 is on the front end, correct? I'm sorry, my mistake. 13 on the front end would require submittal of the report with application materials to demonstrate that they are compliant with
Right.
existing standards.
Right.
But that's not the same, for example, as the city saying that we're going to choose our own standards. This is a ministerial
Right.
checklist item to show that they're complying with federal standards.
All right. Is this the point to keep discussing this? I guess it is. We can just, this is the only thing I have issues on. And it's only because I got into it years ago
I
I can't even remember what, but, it had to do with San Diego, big lawsuit down in San Diego. And not that I was involved in it, but trying to sell some property for somebody down there, or involved with somebody trying to buy property down there. And was a recipient of a whole ton of research was a medical doctor actually going through it all. I mean, anyway, it just raised a lot of concerns about RF, frequencies, but.
I agree, but we've talked about this on a number of other
Yeah.
occasions, I think, going through this, and it's
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
not
I'm
something
good,
that
I'm
we
good
can-
with it, just what you were just talking about, going in that they provide the reports. One question that I have with respect to that is that if you have the towers, we have existing towers, okay? And as these small sites come in, okay, we get the report, and they're not going to emit any more than what is allowed. But if they overlap, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know. But if they overlap, if you've got one tower over here who's emitting signals, and it's within the framework of the criteria of the feds, okay, so we know that's okay. Another one from a different angle says it's okay. They're located a ways away. But at some point, the coverage is going to converge and overlap. So now you have two sets of signals coming in. And where they overlap, is that going to be creating a problem? And we're a small city, so if you get these all around, I mean, they're coming in from the existing ones we have? Is there a cumulative effect on this? Even though each one individually emits what is allowed, but is there a cumulative effect when they start to overlap? That's the question I have. And what I think is a solution to that, it might be I don't know, I don't know if the city has to do this, but should there be some type of a map or something, an assessment of how many of these facilities we have in the city right now, where they're located, and it's kind of what we're talking about, some type of and then you know the coverage, and they're coming in, I'm gonna put one here to fill in some gaps. Well, how far are they filling in the gap? And then we know what the coverage is, and should
Well, I
that be
think
something that we,
We have, if I could, we have two criteria I think address that point. One is, there's a requirement that within 500-foot radius of the proposed small cell wireless antenna, they have to identify all other antennas that exist. Now, you're gonna see in this letter,
she doesn't wanna do that.
yeah, but we're saying that we need to, and that's partly to the point of what you're bringing up, Commissioner DeBolt. And that in combination with the item we just mentioned on page 9, item 13, if all of the antennas are identified, then the radio frequency exposure compliance report should be accounting for that.
Exactly, that's
Right?
what I'm,
So I think we're covering that with what's here. We're requiring them to notify or identify within a 500-foot radius of that antenna, all of the antennas that are in existence. Then we're gonna see this report that comes in that says, here's the situation based on all of that known information. So I think we're covering that
All right.
based on what
Okay.
we have here.
So you have a section here on minimum spacing. Facilities shall be located at least 100 feet away from other facilities. Would that address that as well, or is that just, what about, but then it also talks about co-location, which if they have to be 100 feet apart, that would preclude co-location. So is that 100-foot distance requirement just from the same operator?
It would be any existing. So we want to encourage, if there is that one pole, that street light that gets that one small cell antenna put on it, there's the ability to co-locate another antenna on it. We'd prefer to see that than to see another one within 100 feet. So we don't end up with Verizon putting up, an antenna on one pole and then just right in close proximity to it.
Got it.
T-Mobile's
Okay.
putting another pole up. We're requiring them to merge that together as much as they can,
Right.
so that we don't have that situation where, I think as Tom mentioned, every pole in the city has an antenna on top of it, that we're trying to.
Okay, so you're encouraging
them to consolidate.
co-location and 100 feet regardless of who the operator is.
That's the way we've written it. And again, we're also gonna require them to identify all other poles in existence within 500 feet too. So we're trying to we're doing the 100 feet to
is it poles
try
or?
and consolidate. Then we're also looking at it from the standpoint of what's existing in the area and what's the overall impact within that 500-foot circumference, if you will, within the community. It's, as you know, with this technology, we've talked about this, but just as to revisit very quickly, the whole idea is to get a greater even coverage across the entire community. And smaller antennas at various locations throughout the community tend to provide an overall better coverage than the standard that we're used to, the triangular units that go 50 to 80 feet in the air and cover a much larger area. Those have had some greater impacts to the community, and they have been proven to not necessarily give the best coverage overall. Plus, the technology's changing, as we heard from the group with the new, what was it called? I always get it mixed up. But what is it, something
5G.
5G.
Yeah, I think 5G requires more.
Technology,
Yeah.
it has to be
More antennas.
more direct, and so they're less powerful antennas, more frequently throughout the community, and it has to be more direct to the user. They can't use the larger, older towers to get the coverage. They have to go to smaller throughout the community, less intensive, and again, it's supposed to give a better coverage overall and better service. So hopefully that is covering what, your issue of the 100 feet, or what you brought up, and then also covering Commissioner DeVolt's.
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's.
I think it is, but just so I have some clarity. So within 500 feet, you mentioned other poles. Is it or is it going to be other wireless, all wireless antennas?
Correct, it would be all wireless. So
Okay, fine.
if there's an existing the older triangular, taller
Right,
ones,
so
that's
that's
gonna
in
be taken into
consideration, too.
consideration. It would
Right.
be any wireless communication type facilities like that would have to be identified.
Okay, and going back to I'm gonna go back to the residential end. Would somebody put one on their house? I guess it depends on how much they want to pay them.
And
That, I mean, to me, that's, and those things can be very valuable money. I mean, I know, I don't know them personally, but I have heard of people, I mean, the money they get, 30, 40,000 a month, for just one cell tower location, one mounting it on a building. They have the right location, it's like golden. I mean, it's,
I think there's if I could, Commissioner Bolt, I think there's a key issue that happened that the state established that really kills that going forward with these small cell antennas, and that is within the right of way, there's now a limitation, a cap that can be charged per pole. So if in our community right now, Edison maintains all those poles.
Right.
There's a limitation, a threshold limitation that's very low, very nominal per pole. So what that does is really forces the utility, the providers, to want to go to those poles versus a private venture, because the days of the several $1,000s a month larger poles is going away. It's waning, and so now these smaller antennas that are going in because of the cap on what can be charged, they're all gravitating to those locations because it's much more affordable for them to do that. And they need that in order to get that overall coverage. So it tied our hands, it tied the utilities' hands if we don't control them, but it brought the price down to where it really is much more conducive for that utility or that provider to go out to a power, not a power pole, but usually it's been light standards, the light street light poles have been the desired interest because of that.
all right.
Anybody else have questions for staff or comments?
I think the staff responses are good. on those, so.
Yeah, I agree as well. Does anybody else have any comments about the staff responses to the letter from Verizon?
I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
I'm sorry, Chair, as a point of clarification, can we add to the
Oh.
motion for approval subject to changes
Changes.
consistent with
Yes.
staff's comments?
I'll modify the motion.
Thank you, sir.
I'll second that.
Is that sufficient?
Yes, thank you. very
Okay.
much.
All right, I have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Motion carries. And do we have any, no discussion items, items from the Development Services Director?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commission members. Just a few quick items to make with you. First of all, as a matter of housekeeping, I wanted to mention to you that the general plan amendments that were a part of the recommendation that the commission made to the city council for the zoning code update, those amendments were considered by the city council at their last meeting on the 15th. We attempted to do our best trying to explain this multi-tiered step process we're going through, and they unanimously approved going forward with the amendment, those 3 items that we identified. So we already have gone out and conversed with MIG, and they are already working on that update exercise. So with that, we talked about the schedule, and at this point in time, we are scheduled to come before the Planning Commission with those general plan amendments, those 3 items, and with the zoning map. You recall, that's still an outstanding item to update the official zoning map to be consistent with the general plan and obviously the directive that's been given by the commission, or recommendation that's given by the commission. So we plan on bringing those 2 items back to you for your consideration at the September meeting. We also found that there may be a couple of minor things that I know you already made that recommendation on that large zoning code amendment. We did find a couple of items that we're currently investigating, and we may bring back a couple of points that we think you would agree with, that staff found that we just hate to second guess that, but we found a couple of items, and actually Commissioner DeBolt and I talked about this, and we're going to meet next week briefly to talk further about it. But we may be bringing that back just for clarification purposes, and it may result in a couple of minor modifications to that. And then in October, we'll bring the entire package to City Council and hopefully not overwhelm them with those three items, that being a general plan amendment, the comprehensive zoning code amendment, and then the official zoning map of the city, all being addressed at that time in October. So again, we appreciate all of the time, effort that the commissioners have put into this exercise. We're getting close to the finish line, and we hope to have that wrapped up with the commission at the September meeting. I also wanted to mention that the annual American Planning Association Conference is coming up. It'll be held September 15th through the 18th in Santa Barbara. Staff is not planning to go this year, I don't believe. I'm not going to be able to go either. But if any of the commissioners are interested in attending or would like more information about the conference, please let us know. I believe it's at the Fest Parker. It's a great place. Obviously, the state conference always has very good topics, but if you're interested, please let us know, and we'll certainly look into what we can do to help with registration and so on and so forth for that. The final item I wanted to mention to you, if you haven't already heard, City Manager Plumley has announced that he will be retiring from the city. And this has happened just recently, and he'll be departing. His last day from work here will be on August 16th. That's a Friday. And after almost 6 years of service here with the city, and I think 32 years of public service. He's retiring from PERS, but he's not retiring from work. He's actually venturing over to work for the company HDL as one of their staff members, that he'll be starting in September on that effort. So we are in the process of going forward with the recruitment for the city manager position. In that interim period, I have the council had asked if I would serve in that capacity as interim, so I'll be doing that for 3 months starting on the 17th of August. And be helping in that area, as well as continuing to do my obligations and duties with the Development Services Department. So if you have any questions with regards to any of that, I'd be happy to talk with you one-on-one at any time. But I just want to make sure you're aware that Mr. Plumley will be departing on the 16th. And if you wanted to wish him any farewells, I'm sure he'd love to hear from you. And with that, that concludes my items this evening.
Thank you. That takes us to Commissioner reports. Anything from anybody? All right, meeting adjourned. Back to time.